One. We're live.
Okay, we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hobby Vomit. So this is pretty exciting. Matt has been on edge for months now. So we have been really hoping for this day to come, and it's finally here. We are going to be doing a review of the first part of Deadhouse Gates. So this is largely just for us to give our thoughts on what we've read so far, kind of what our hopes and desires are for moving forward through the book. And just so far, I think for both of us, we've been really enjoying it, and we're just excited to be able to like read this together and share our thoughts together and share our thoughts with all of you as well. It's going to be a really fun ride. So we're going to do each part. They call them like lowercase b books, but it's a long series. But then when each book of the series, there are different parts, and so we're going to do kind of a video for each of those parts. And then at the end, we will do a kind of a discussion over the entire book. So this is Deadhouse Gates. So we'll do each kind of part of Deadhouse Gates. We've not read beyond part one of Deadhouse Gates. I think the first part's called Raraku. I think is how we pronounce that. I'm not quite sure. I'm not great at pronunciations, but
Yeah, we're going to mess up names
yeah, yeah.
often.
Well,
Even there's going to be inconsistency even between us. Like, it's just one of those. And from myself, I'll say Malazan, and the next sentence I'll say Malazan.
Yeah.
It's just,
I was
I think
about
it's
to
one of
say,
those
yeah.
things that's it's just going to happen. So forgive us.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think it's a
And so-
Raraku. I
Yeah.
think that's actually how we technically pronounce it.
I think the trick is we just say rah you just let it drone off, right?
Yeah.
So so that's the part we've read, and so we'll do kind of a discussion over that. We've not read beyond that, and we'll kind of give our thoughts and expectations moving forward. Chances are, when it comes to the thoughts and expectations, if I've learned anything from reading Gardens of the Moon, it's that we will probably be totally wrong, and that's totally okay. And then again, once we've read the entire Deadhouse Gates, we'll do our own special review of that. Now, this also means that everything that we're doing from here moving forward is spoilers. So if you've not read the first part of Deadhouse Gates, we are going to be spoiling a lot, but we won't spoil anything past that because we've not read past that. So if we do say anything that like maybe happens to be a spoiler, we didn't know. We're just speculating over what's going to happen.
Yep.
So anything beyond this part, we don't know. So yeah. And I just want to also mention too, like in terms of where I come from, for me, this whole series has kind of felt like a merger of like classical fantasy and epic mythology, and I'm all here for it. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
So.
I think you're going to be like Professor Ian
Yeah.
in this discussion. I'm like the dumb that like misses things, and this discussion's equally as much just for my intelligence as it is for entertainment, because I feel like you pick up on a lot of stuff I don't. So it's going to be a lot of you being like, well, this was this. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I see it. So I'm like, I'm the every man here, and you're here to school me, Professor.
Well, we will see. There's definitely going to be some parts where I'm wrong, and but overall, it's going to be good vibes all around because it's just two guys excited for a book series.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Okay, so with that, was there anything else you wanted to add, Matt?
I don't think so. I guess schedule wise, we're gonna try and keep, fairly consistent. Maybe one or two a month, I think is what we had talked about, and we'll kind of see if we ever want to accelerate that. We can, but we don't want to push too hard. But we do want to. I think we're both feeling fairly locked in to do the series. I'm sure there are lots of series like this that fall off, and I think we hope to not be one of them, unless we both start hating the books. But I think we both love Gardens, and that's supposed to be by far the worst book of the series. So I'm pretty much landed where this is. If the quality continues, it's going to be my favorite series. So hopefully there will be some kind of consistency that you can rely on us to get some videos out, and feel free to discuss with us, because that's what we're doing this for. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I guess you can say the mantra, the theme moving forward is DDNF. So it's the don't not finish. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
The double negative. Now, I guess before we move any further, obviously I'm Ian. This is Matt. Right? It's Hobby Vomit. If we didn't say it, but we should probably. This is our first kind of recording together.
Mm-hmm.
I also have kind of a new setup, and we used to be on StreamYards, but now we're on OBS. So let's just real quick, in terms of mic check. I know, is your mic and your desktop audio, are they both coming through on OBS?
Yeah, it seems like it.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, let's keep
Hope
moving
so.
forward. So
Otherwise, we'll
yeah,
do it again.
yeah. Otherwise, what we do is we post it, and then we'll have like you can come in for like we can come in for like an after
Yeah,
review.
sound
You
booth.
know,
Yeah.
we like sound over or
Hmm.
voice over our own voiceover. Anyway, so I think that probably the best way to open this up, because Deadhouse Gates is the second book of the series. So I have been posting videos for Gardens of the Moon, and by the time that this video comes out, I'll have the rest of those videos out for Gardens of the Moon, which is the first book of the or the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. So if you've not read Gardens of the Moon, you definitely want to read Gardens of the Moon before moving on to Deadhouse Gates. This being the second book, I really wanted to kind of just do a quick recap over what happened at the end of Gardens.
Yeah.
So now I'm not going to recap the entire book. I just want to kind of recap what I thought were some pretty pertinent elements. Forgive me if there's some things that I missed that will become pertinent. But of course, if they do, then we'll bring them up then. So I think the main thing I was thinking of was, for me, there was kind of like three key things to remember from the end of Gardens of the Moon. So the first key thing relates to some of our characters. So we had multiple crews featured in Gardens of the Moon that kind of all intersected on Drujistan or Jujukistan, I think, Jujukistan, and then fractions of those crews come together to come back to Malaz in Deadhouse Gates, and so kind of to where we are now. We're not quite to Malaz, but that was Kalam, who is the assassin from the Malazan Empire's bridge burners. And then we have Fiddler, who is a saboteur, also from the bridge burners. And then we had Absalar and Crocus. And so Absalar, previously known as Sari, previously known as We're Not Sure, was essentially a fisher girl from Malaz who was possessed by the Rope, who is the assassin to Shadow Throne, these two ascendants, who were effectively like gods.
Was
And then
she
Crocus,
also, sorry to interrupt, but was she
yeah, yeah.
was she also possessed by like that witch? Like wasn't she
Yes,
like double possessed?
yes, and so,
Okay.
but so it's slightly different with the witch though, because the ascendant's possession, and we kind of learned this from Sari the Rope, who is also known as Cotillion. There's a lot of names
There's so many names.
in this series, but so there, what we learned from Sari was that Sari intended to obliterate like the personhood of the person that Cotillion possessed, the person that he possessed. And so the Fisher Girl was to be no more. So the idea is that like a possessed could technically be removed, like the rope could be removed from the possessed, but then they would essentially like enter like a vegetative state, right? It's kind of like the idea is like, or effectively die. Like we don't really know what would happen, but we'd assume that they would be effectively dead. And then what we learned was that this seer, this witch, was also there as well, protecting the Fisher Girl from obliteration.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
and then after, so only one of the problems, of course, is that the person who is quote quote obliterated, not in this case, that they aren't actually aware of what's going on. So when the rope is pulled out and who we now know as Absalar, like the Fisher Girl, when she regains consciousness, she gets all of those memories of everything that happened. Maybe not all at once, but from what we would understand, even if she had come back to consciousness, she would have gotten like 2 years worth of memories all at once of the Rope, who is an assassin, assassinating people in pretty gruesome manner, when she was just like a Fisher Girl. And so it would have been extremely, extremely traumatic. And so what we're also understanding is that the seer is effectively putting a tap, if you will, on those memories, so they're coming out in a trickle rather than like all at once. And so for whatever reason, the seer is protecting Absalar, protecting like her psyche.
Okay.
And now presumably is self-serving, But they seem to have a symbiotic relationship, whereas a like a descendant who possessing someone is not symbiotic.
Okay.
Right, not at all. And so, but we're seeing some kind of cool things there. And so then we've got lastly Crocus, who is a thief from Tajikistan, and they're traveling together on the premise to deliver Absalar back to her home because she doesn't know what happened to it in the last couple of years, and she left family behind. And Crocus really likes Absalar. And then, as we know from part one, we didn't know then, but now we know in Deadhouse Gates that Plum and Fiddler have an ulterior motive for wanting to go back. And so they're all traveling together. The pertinent thing with Absalar is having been possessed, even though she is not the rope, she has over 2 years of muscle memory of the rope doing their thing. So one of the strongest assassins known to mankind possessed her body for 2 years and did all of the assassin things. So her muscle memory is astounding, right? And that becomes pertinent throughout the series or throughout the part one. So that was the first thing. The second thing I think is worth noting is that the bridge burners were under the authority of Dujek, who was the high fist for Malazan, and they are all now declared outlaws. They were declared outlaws at the end of Gardens of the Moon, which means that they would be executed, right, by the Malazan army. They are enemies of the Empress. Okay. So we have that the crew is coming back. We have that the bridge burners have been outlawed, and then thirdly, we have that Shadow Throne and the Rope were kind of central characters to the politics of the last of the Gardens of the Moon, and that there was this strong implication that Lysine, who's the Empress, was playing this chess match with the gods. That the Shadow Throne was kind of one of the key enemies that she sought. Even though we didn't see like an outright war with Shadow Throne, so to speak, really it was Lysine trying to get the bridge burners killed for that first book. There does appear to be a strong or high degree of tension between these two ascendants and the Empress, and they appear to be sort of engaged in this kind of match. And we didn't really understand the context for all of that in the first one, but that becomes pertinent for part one of this book.
Yeah.
So,
and then I guess I'll just mention just real life stuff about this book. From what I understand, Steven Erikson wrote Guards of the Moon, I think in like 91. It didn't get published till 99, but I think he wrote it in 91 and then started working on what is now the third book, I believe, which I think is Memories of Ice. I think that's the third book. And so he was writing his manuscript for that, and then lost his laptop, lost all of that work, and basically was like, okay, well, I'm not writing that again. And that was I think, as far as I know, the direct sequel to Gardens of the Moon with a lot of the main characters, main cast. And then instead, he was like, well, instead of writing that, I'm going to write Deadhouse Gates. And so this came out second, even though, and so there is a big, I mean, we don't know, but from what I understand, we don't see the majority of the characters from book one in this book. It's a whole separate continent, pretty much separated, new cast of characters, which is really interesting. And this was also written 10 years after Gardens of the Moon. So big gap. I've heard there's some inconsistencies. I don't know if they're probably so, I'll never catch them, I don't think, likely. But yeah, I guess there are a few little inconsistencies from Gardens to this. But yeah, I just thought that was a fun little fact. I mean, 10 years between. So far, I've definitely been able to see the difference in Erikson's writing. I think he's grown a lot as a writer between the two. And I loved let's say what our, because I don't know if I read before I created the channel. So I scored Gardens of the Moon a 4.5 out of 5. I thought it was really good. I really loved it. Yeah, so that's what I gave it. Just so you know, going into the series.
Yeah, and like I'm gonna do a video review for Gardens of the Moon. We call it our barf review. And I think for me it falls at roughly a 4.5, if not a larger. Really, the only thing for me that was kind of holding it back a little bit was And I mean, there's so many characters, but they're just like Lauren, I think, was undercooked, and I really would have liked her to be better developed. But that was kind of one of my only real gripes
Yeah,
about the book.
I kind
Yeah.
of feel the same for a lot of the characters. It's weird. He walks that line so finely of like I'm a big character driven reader,
Mm.
and like you said, there's so many characters. I think it's virtually impossible to develop all of them
Yeah.
really well without making them the books like huge. So, but I also think he weirdly does a good job for not having a ton of like slow moments with characters. I still feel like most of them are pretty well
Mm.
developed.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's how I feel too.
so yeah, even I thought that was going to hurt more than it did, but I do think that's where that point 0.5 lost for me. Is like I
Mhm.
would have loved to spend even more time with some of these characters, which I'm sure we will throughout the rest of the series, probably. But I also know we're about to be introduced to a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So there's only so many pages, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, real quick, I did want to show off the
Oh, nice.
the sexy broken binding edition. I'm not going to show the inside papers because I'm guessing they're spoilers. I mean, I'm guessing the front. This is a spoiler too,
Yeah.
because I'm guessing this is something that happens in the book. Otherwise, why would it be on the front? But you know, most books
Mhm.
do that, so
Yep.
I'm okay with showing that part. It might lend to a
Yeah.
little a bit of my predictions though.
Okay.
The book spoiled the book, but
And then yeah, so my students will always tell you that if I say this is the last thing, it's never the last thing. But I did remember one thing we should probably mention. If I'm not mistaken, Deadhouse Gates takes place about 2 years, or like 1 to 2 years after Gardens of the Moon ends. So
I
I
was
think
under
we,
the impression it just rolled because they're still
I think technically so, but I think we're meant to understand that the journey from
mm,
from
that continent.
yeah, from Justan to, like, they've been on the water for months,
And they stopped a couple of places too.
and they stopped a couple places. So I think it's been like almost a
Oh,
year going
yeah.
into 2 years.
Yeah, because
Uh,
I'm pretty sure in the beginning of this one it does open up with the year, and I think it's
yeah.
1164,
Yep.
and Gardens of the Moon is 1163. So yeah, it
Yeah.
might be approaching a year or so.
Because it goes like ninth year of Lysine's reign and then 10th year of Lysine's reign, and I believe that the first book ends going into the ninth year.
Hmm.
And so I think, yeah, we're now kind of getting into that end of ninth into the 10th.
Okay, nice.
So just to kind of let people know, like, it, in some sense, it does take place right after Gardens of the Moon, but we just have to remember that there's a long journey
Yeah.
that they have to take to get to where they are. So presumably everything from Gardens to now was basically just like the Moana experience of just on a boat in the ocean, you know. So
Some close
just
bonding.
so good, exactly.
I don't know.
So
I
very,
always
very
pictured
close bonding.
like the boat being clearly it's not, but when they first got on, I was like, "Oh, it's like a little rowboat basically with like 5 of them on this." And then I'm like, "Oh no, they traveled continents." And
Yeah.
things that happened in the first part, I'm like, "Okay, this is probably just like I mean, like how big is this boat?"
You
It
remember
seems
you
like
remember
it's still
watching
small.
Waterworld? It's probably
Yeah.
like that big. Yeah.
Okay.
It's it's still pretty intimate quarters.
So it's like a personal like sailboat kind of
Yeah,
size.
yeah. Well, and
Okay.
they did talk about like Crocus learns how to sail and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they have sails.
Or they or they just got real buff, you know. I mean,
Yeah, they're just 2 oars and yeah, 5 guys. Or 4 guys in an Absolar.
yeah.
Which, by the way, I guess that's one other thing to note. Well, I guess we'll talk about that as we talk about the beginning of the part. But,
Yep.
um, so yeah, I guess we can talk about just general overview first of what happened. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty yet of what actually happened, but just an overview of what happened in part 1, Raraku, or whatever. In which basically, so we're catching up with Fiddler and the crew that are on the boat and their journey, and we kind of figure out what they're doing. This does take place on an entire new continent called the Seven Cities. And really, we're just learning about the politics, essentially, of what is happening in 7 cities. There's an uprising brewing. a rebellion. So there's that. There's also word of like an apocalypse coming. And so we have a couple different groups of characters as well. But I would say from book one, Fiddler is our main. Fiddler and and crew are our main people and what they're up to. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of political machinations. Like, not a ton happens for sure, but like general, super high level overview. It felt like I was just learning about the continent and the different races on the continent, and it's a lot of setup, which makes sense for a part one. Did you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, so the one thing I was thinking about, when we started kind of going back and forth to put our notes together for the video, um, I would say that, it hit me that for this book, the intrigue factor jumped a lot higher, about 116 or so pages
I think you say
into the
percent.
book. 116 pages into the part one, which for me part one was 136 pages. So I would say that part of that is also I'm not a big like desert guy. Like I mean I enjoy Mad Max as much as the next person, but I've just never been like big desert vibe. But I think it's very much that it's just like a lot of setup for us to understand some really important things about the world. And so I would say that this is definitely one of those things where there's kind of an assumption, let's say, if you're reading book two, that you're at this point, you're excited about the series. And so just be prepared that I would say a big part of part one, a significant goal of part one, it felt like, was to show us how things are changing from Gardens of the Moon, and specifically like how things are being affected by, for example, the path of hands, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I think for me that felt like what I was learning. I felt like I was trying to learn about the anomalies that are happening in this world right now, or supposed anomalies that are happening, rather than learning about like the specific motivations of specific characters. We're kind of learning how the world is changing,
Yeah.
which I think is very cool. And you do get a payoff for that in part one. It just comes at the end of part one.
Yeah. It definitely felt like we, as someone that has not read a ton of fantasy, it was like really my first year, going into year two of reading fantasy as an adult. So Gardens of the Moon was a tougher read, but to my liking. I really loved going back and forth with the map and doing all of that. And that felt like, right, here's a big scope. We're covering basically in Gardens of the Moon, it's a whole continent. Genebacus, I think, is the continent.
Yep.
And then this book's just like zoom out. Now you get another continent. And I'm just like, all right. Like, I feel like I don't even know that much about Genebacus yet, because really it was just Arujistan and Pale.
Yeah.
And then there's other things with like the ant guys. I can't remember their name. Like the ant people, the insectoids. I don't remember their name.
Moran?
Yeah. And then there's the dude up in the north, like Kaladin Brood or something like that.
Kaladin Brood, who lives. I guess he was a Crimson Guard, and then he worked for Animander Rake of Moonspawn. So then there's like also this like floating island,
Yeah.
And like I mean, and to be fair, like that's huge because if you look at most fantasy, specifically Western fantasy, the target is Europe, right? And I remember when I was like kind of first putting together fantasy for playing D&D, I was like, ooh, what I want to do is I want to do like this and this and this. And I started putting together like different landscapes, and then I realized that I had gotten to something the size of like half the United States, or like maybe slightly bigger. And then I was like, oh, I wonder how that compares to other stories. And I realized that like every fantasy is basically just the size of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And Western fantasies is always the size of Europe. So like to have a fantasy, by the way, go from book one, like, oh, here's a continent. It's like kind of the size of Europe. And then book two is like, no, we're going to go to another continent.
Yeah.
Is wild. I mean, that's not what happens in a lot of fantasies.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem like that was Steven Eriksson's desire maybe either, because it seemed like he was trying to write the sequel, and then was just like, well, I don't want to. I lost all this. I don't want to do it again. So we're just gonna start something new, but still it felt like a natural transition to me of
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we're picking up where with Fiddler and them where they left off, and like they had. I want to say they talked about the seven cities, and it doesn't feel like he's just like, here's new stuff for the sake of new stuff. It feels like you can already feel the impact of the Malaz Empire on this continent. So it feels very natural moving over to this other continent. But yeah, desert. You mentioned the desert. This is, I mean, it seems like this whole book's going to be in the desert, which I would tend to agree. It's not my favorite. I don't get super excited about it, but I've loved it so far. It's been exciting desert. Like, I don't know. I just wasn't expecting like them riding horses in the desert in this book, and it's been kind of fun. But yeah, I think that's really. I just wanted to make sure I said that this is it feels like a major zoom out already. So really enjoyed that. But we met a ton of new characters. There's like different groups that we'll talk about when we get into our character discussion. Lots of groups forming. And then, yeah, we don't really necessarily see what people are wanting all the time. By the end, I do feel like I have a pretty good idea of what everyone's intentions are for the most part. But it was a lot of world building in Raraku. But very good world building. So, yeah. Anything else you wanted to add to just general high-level overview of book one?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. What I was thinking was I might just go ahead and kind of lay out what I think for part one is kind of the spine, the thread, if you will, and then we can kind of take that into like the factions and characters.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
And so there is a prologue in this book, much like there was a prologue in Guardians of the Moon, and it kind of sets the stage, so to speak, for certain events. Oh, I would say it sets the tone is maybe the right way to go about it. And certainly, I think the prologue for Deadhouse Gates really has set a tone for what's about to happen. But what I kind of see as sort of the important thread, kind of connecting everything, is this path of hands that I mentioned earlier. So I was telling Matt that the end of Guardians of the Moon was cracking me up because there was just these scenes that were just like so anime where characters would come in and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, my power level is even this. And so, at the with Animander Rake in Guardians of the Moon, we get this scene where he's going against this demon. They're like, oh gosh, this demon is soul taken. And Animander's like, I'm soul taken too. Transforms into dragon, right? And like comes down, swooping down. And we're like, okay, well, WTF is this soul taken thing? Is this like the, the anime of there's another power level here that we have to learn about? And, but we don't really get to know too much about what it means to be soul taken. And so in Deadhouse Gates, we're kind of dropped into this world where all of a sudden we're starting to see something that's supposedly rare become abundant, which is a really cool thing. And so these soul taken are all of a sudden like on a frenzy. They're all being drawn like moths to a flame. We were talking about How to Train a Dragon the other day, and in like the first, if you haven't watched it, by the way, you've had the time. So, but all the dragons get called to the queen. And they can't help themselves. They have to go, right? And so it's kind of like that. These soul taken are compelled to seek something. We don't know what it is. All that it's called is the convergence.
And the along with the soul taken, I don't know if they're divers or divers.
Yeah, I think it's like divers, like divers or like divers.
Divers. There's like that apostrophe.
Divers. Which, as far as I can tell, they're soul taken that can manifest as a group of things.
Yep.
So they're commonly like packs of animals or insects is like a really common one. And so it's like soul taken will typically be like they'll manifest themselves as like a demon or an animal or some kind of like individual thing like a dragon. Usually something that's could be gargantuan or intimidating. And then like the divers are like they can spread into parts, and so each part is like weaker than the whole. But you can imagine that they're quite voracious because they can hoard you, right? They can mob you. And what we're effectively told is that they're all seeking this, but they don't get along very well. Like a lot of Soul Taken Endeavors, like they travel as individuals. They don't travel together. And so there's this sort of like Hunger Games esque battle royale going on throughout the story as these people are just being compelled to this path of hands, this convergence, and they're like killing each other over it the entire time. And so this is for me kind of a defining thread of the story because it's changing everything that we know. Like Warrens are, we don't really know that much about Warrens. We know that they're like the place of ascendance. We know that they're the place that people draw magic from, but like even those are changing because of this convergence. So I think this kind of convergence like sort of is like a herald of changing times, and that sort of is like the theme I felt like of part one.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. That, and then I think equally as important is this uprising that is brewing against the Malaz Empire. And then another thread that's being set up, or I'm assuming it's going to be an important thread, seems like the beginning of it, is the setup of Coltane moving down to Erin. I'm assuming this because there's maps in the front of the book that are called Coltane's March or something like that. So I'm like, all right, this is important because there's a map. So it must be. But yeah, it really does feel like there's, this like cult, like apocalypse cult kind of thing. And then, an uprising, a rebellion against an empire, and all that's being set up. So, yeah.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where, like, I was saying, the things that really picked up for me, like, in part one. When I was kind of working on my own fantasy, one of the things I always really loved was like the idea of like the fall of the Roman Empire. Like, what would it have been like to be there, like right before the fall, like going into the Dark Ages? And I think right now, kind of what we're seeing is it feels like that is being captured very, very well in Deadhouse Gates, where we're having these like ominous events combined with or coupled with like significant turmoil in terms of rebellions and resistances and uprisings and people vying for power in their own way at the cost of like the empire, let's say. And it feels very cool, right? We're in this constant point of like maybe everything's about to collapse. Yeah,
I don't know about you, but I'm certainly at this point like down with the empire. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how much I am rooting for the other guys. I don't, because we don't know if they're good or bad, and technically I guess we don't know that about the Malaz Empire or not. But I kind of want to see it crumble right now. As of right now, it might change.
Yeah. Well, there's like a beautiful thing, right? I mean, for example, the Dark Ages, we always call them Dark Ages, but like, there was a lot of really awesome things that happened during the Dark Ages, like explosions of mathematics, explosions of music, right? There's a lot of great things, poetry, like a lot of great things came out of the Dark Ages. It's just like a phoenix, like here we are, we're about to see the whole thing just go up in flames.
Yeah.
But there's always what comes after too, which is exciting. So it's gonna be cool. I think that kind of leads us. If you're ready, we can kind of go into characters because I think the book actually outside the prologue opens up with two significant characters that are kind of an exception to the rule, at least what it seemed like to me, which is Icarium and Mappo, I think is the names.
Well, you want to talk about the prologue first? Because that's our first real kind of group of characters. Well,
yeah, and
it's up to you actually. If you want to jump into Mappo and Icarium, that works too.
So, well, I guess the question would just become. I mean, maybe we should talk about the prologue when we get to talking about. I can never remember the prison they're at.
The Otataral Island.
Well, no,
it's like skull something, skull cap.
Skull cap. Yeah, and so it's Otataral is the thing that they're mining. It is the ore. It's this like a resistant ore, and we got that in Gardens as well. And so, but yeah, that's that they're mining, and yeah, I think it's like skull cap. So maybe we'll talk about the prologue when we talk about that. We can kind of mix that in with the Wiccans. I think that would be kind of There's a relationship there that we don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, that sounds good. So yeah, let's jump into Mappo and Icarium, which I gotta say, when I started reading their part, there was a lot of like, who, what, huh? I'm like, Devers, and then they like
Yep.
there's like a Dever. They're like hunting a demon, kind of, but one of the demons actually a Dever
Mm-hmm.
demon, and he's
Mm-hmm.
got a name. I can't remember his name, but yeah, I would say that was the most like it definitely felt like, oh, I'm back in Malazan right now because I'm so lost, but
Mm-hmm.
I grew to really like Mappo and Icarium.
They're my favorite characters right now. There's definitely this if you go back and read, like if you ever read like The Hobbit, or there's very much like this sort of like um Gandalf vibe, where if you I don't know how long it's been since you've read The Hobbit, but like in The Hobbit, Gandalf's leading the dwarves, and there's just constant like, oh, I know this person and I know that person, and we run into, oh, I know this person. It's just like, what the heck is going on, right? And that's how it is for like Mappo and Icarium. It's like every time we see something, they're like, oh yeah, it's that person
Yeah.
again, right? Because like they're supposedly like very old, and so even though they don't, I mean, they're both, from what we understand, probably soul taken. But even despite that, like they know about a lot of the other soul taken endeavors, is
Mhm.
what it seems to me. And so it's kind of interesting. Now that's not going to stop them from killing each other, to be fair. Um, you
For
know, and
Mappo and Icarium?
no, from the, yeah,
Oh.
for stopping them from killing the
Oh
other.
yeah, I see.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, wait a
The
minute, what did I
corporate.
miss? Do they
Yeah,
hate
yeah,
each
it's not
other or
necessarily.
like?
Yeah, it won't stop them from, just because they know about these other Devers and Soul Taken. They'll still fight for their lives. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of an interesting element. And
And one of
even
them?
even people they, oh, you were
No,
saying?
no, no. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say even people that they're on like friendly terms with, it's still like hand on the pommel.
Yeah, there's a
You
lot of
know.
tension with every time
Yeah.
they meet somebody, but
Yeah.
they seem close. I guess I can't remember if we know how long they've known each other, but I found it interesting. One of them was a because Mappo. What's his last name? It's like his race kind of thing,
Trell, I think, right?
and I think he is a Trell, and like
Yes.
maybe
I
that's
think
just
I
how
think that's right.
they name
Yep.
themselves. And then Icarium, if I remember correctly,
Yep.
is of some relation to the Jagut.
Yeah. Um, yep. And I may have misread, but in terms of how long they know each other, I think there's a point where Icarium was referred to as Icarium Trell, even though he's half Jagut. And so I
Oh, okay.
think that they are in some sense like brothers.
They seem
Where
really
I,
close. Yeah, that would make
yeah,
sense.
so I think like, so Icarium is like technically supposed to be Icarium Jagut because he's a Jagut. And then it's Mappo Trell, I think that's right. But it feels like they're like essentially of the same clan.
Hmm.
They act like that for sure.
Yeah, and they're basically traveling. I don't know if it really makes it super clear. It seems like they were hunting some kind of demon in the beginning, or maybe they were just traveling the desert. Were they part of
Yeah,
being?
they're
Go ahead.
yeah. So I think they are part of the Path of Hands.
Okay,
Yeah.
but they
Because
have a very interesting run in towards the end. They
yeah,
meet Iskaral Pust.
yeah, and his servant. Don't forget about his
Oh
servant.
my gosh, and a servant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Who
which
yeah.
great. Also, I'm like, okay, who? They're like, okay, well, he's like and they like pull him up into basically this, not monastery, but like, I don't know, this clubhouse in the cliffs,
Yeah, it's a shadow temple.
the shadow temple. That's
Yeah,
the word
it's an abandoned shadow temple
for the
with
Queen of
effectively
Shadows.
no doors. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but he definitely seems
The-
like Escaral Pus like lives there, or seemingly
yes,
has been there
yeah.
and occupies it.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, this everything that I would say, while I liked all of that, that is the most unfamiliar territory for me,
Hmm.
where like I found I was able to follow even like the convergence, right, and what the rest of the Thievers and stuff are going. I don't really know where this plot is going so much, but I like it.
Hmm.
And I like their interactions, especially with the servant. I love Iskaral Pust. He's hilarious.
Yeah,
Like,
he's right on the edge where you're like, you don't know if he's actually crazy, right?
yeah,
You're like, you seem really crazy, but it's almost like so much so that maybe you're not. Just oh,
yeah, he's definitely got something cooking for sure.
mm,
And it seems like after everything, servant also maybe knows more than he's letting on.
yeah.
He's like listening on conversations, and
Mm-hmm.
and all that. So I found him
Yeah.
an interesting character, and he's also a soul taken, right? Because doesn't he approach the first time as like a mule?
Yes. Yeah. So I think we're to assume that he's soul taken. He also has like characteristics of the Baccaral in a way. Um, but yeah, he's interesting. He is like human, but not. And so I think as best as we can tell, he's soul taken.
Yeah, which makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's our first kind of big
Hmm.
group.
And then the thing I wanted to mention with them, because it's kind of worth knowing for motivations, is so Trell or Trellin is one of the elder warrens, right? And so we're told that there's these
Mm,
old, really old warrens, right? And they're called the elder rings. And so Trell or Trellin is one of them, and that was
okay.
a pretty significant one. I believe I'm trying to remember what the Trellin was used for. It's slipping my mind all of a sudden. I should have put that in my notes, but it was one of the warrens we see near the end of
Oh,
Gardens of the Moon.
that's the Talani Moss one. Because
Yeah,
at some point they're like Talani Moss. They weren't on Seven Cities continent,
yeah,
but their Warren's
and,
here, or evidence
yeah,
of their Warren is here.
yeah. And then Jagut, right? So the Jagut Tyrant, right, is the one of the badasses of Gardens of the Moon. But the Jagged are also one of the Elderings, and so like the Telenomas, the Trellins, the Jagut, like these are some of the Elderings. So, oh, we should probably we might want to move the recording in progress. Hi,
What?
Chris. Sorry, we forgot to move over to recording.
Oh,
You're on camera. You're live.
You're live.
What'd you
No
think about
worries, bud.
Deadhouse Gates?
okay,
Here.
guys. Talk later.
Yeah. See, Chris.
See ya.
Do we wanna move over to the other Discord?
Yeah, let's do it. One moment. Technical difficulties.
So I got my
There we
camera
go.
back up, so it should.
Yeah, everything
looks like the
locked
feed
back
should
into
pop back up.
place. Am I safe to assume that
Perfect.
Jaguts are the orcs, if you will?
Yeah, I
Of
think
Malazan?
that's correct. And
They're
that
like
appears
tusked
to be
and stuff, right?
yeah, and then remember they have and this is what we're seeing with the carrying, which is the last thing I was going to mention. So I love that we're pulling you into the fantasy realm, man. You're making that connection, but you remember he's the one where Mappo is seriously concerned that Ikariam is going to lose his crap and just start going on a murdering rampage.
Yeah.
Because remember he like blacks out like every time they get in a fight.
Yeah.
And he doesn't remember. And so but it appears to be at the end of part 1, Mappo has this inner dialogue where he feels like he's betraying Ikariam in a way, but he's doing it for the right reasons. And so it seems to be like the case that like they need to do this because there's like something wrong. And it's like deeply connected to something with Ikariam.
I see.
And there's like an element there where they almost seem to be like concerned like he might lose his like identity in a way.
Yeah.
And maybe that's mixed in with like a soul taken because neither of them I think have transformed at all. I think they've stayed in their main form the entire time. So yeah, so kind of interesting.
Yeah, I like that too because I feel like that was one thing I was missing of like I don't really know what their purpose was. It just seemed like they were traveling and then they stumbled upon Iskaralpust. But yeah, you're right. I think that makes sense, right? They're trying to solve something with Ikariam's like kind of blackouts or whatever to prevent it from happening more. And then one other character I want to note that they meet like Ralalum or I don't know his name and I didn't write it down. Something like that, who is one of the like named Devers.
Yep.
And then they also meet another guy who's the bear. I don't remember his name, but he seems like he might be, or maybe they're both going to be relevant. I mean, it's hard to tell with Steven Erickson because I'm like, oh, it's a named character. I probably should remember. But then also there's like 1,300 named characters in this series. I'm like, that might be the only time we see him.
Yeah.
But the bear, it seemed like the bear and Ikariam, if I remember correctly, knew each other well.
I think he knew of Ikariam.
Just
I
of
think
each
him
other
and
well,
Mappo,
okay.
yeah, he knew of Ikariam and he knew Mappo. He especially knew of Ikariam well enough to know that that anyone who would cross their path would probably die.
Okay.
Is what it seemed like. Like Ikariam is like a philosopher that's like well known, so to speak. He's very smart, but like people also know like he's super deadly. That's what it seems like.
Cool.
So it's just really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm loving that story. How that storyline's developed.
Yeah, I'm excited to see get a little more clarity as to maybe the purpose and
Mhm.
what's going to happen, because that's when I think about like my predictions, which we won't talk about here, but just in general, I feel like I can at least have some kind of idea, even if I'm wrong. But with them, I'm like, I literally have no idea. I have no
Yeah,
idea
yeah, yeah. Same.
where this is going next. But I'm here for it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm along for the ride. I just have no predictions.
Mhm.
Like I would never have guessed that they ran into Iskarelpust,
Yeah, yeah.
because I thought they were going to end up maybe more where Shaik is or something.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it seemed like. But so yeah,
So
it's
then
our
I think
first
the
like
next
main players.
And I think the next one to jump over wasn't necessarily our next players, but I think this is just to kind of continue a thread here. We have a really awesome scene with a very strange character who goes by Sormo Anath, who is this like old warlock in now a young kid's body
Yeah.
as like a way of his like reincarnation, if we want to call it that. And we have this kind of amazing scene where I got totally thrown for a loop, so to speak, of just like it comes out of nowhere. And I think it's really meant to feel like that because it certainly is for the characters. But we have this other interesting set of characters. And so they're a mixture of different factions. There are Malazans. There's what are called Wiccans, where these like Wiccans are kind of a new faction that's coming up because their leader has been elected as a fist. I think is he the high fist now, or is he just a fist?
I think he's just a fist, because it's
Yeah.
high fist. I
Fist.
want to say Pormqual is
Pormqual,
the high
yeah.
fist.
And so, but he's been kind of elected as a fist, which is very controversial. But he has a commander who is jokingly his nephew, but his name's Bolt. And so Bolt is a Wiccan, and then the Malazan is a Duker. And then
I think Bolt is his uncle. I think Coltane is the nephew, right?
Well, but you're right. But then also like Duker refers to Bolt as an uncle, so I don't.
Yeah, they have a very strange. They say they have a very strange sense of humor that like Duker doesn't get, and I don't get it. But it's I'm like Duker like kind of is just like, oh, I think I made a joke. Did I?
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. No. So Culp is the other one. So then we got Duker, who's like a historian, but there's a bit more to him than that, I think. And then there's Culp, who is a warlock. So both of them are Malazans.
Yep.
And then Bolt is a Wiccan. And then Sormo Anath is a warlock who is with the Wiccans.
Yeah.
And so, but Swarmo is well respected. And of course, Duker and Culp are kind of charged with, kind of integrating with these Wiccans. And so even Duker is like overseeing the integration of the Malazans and the Wiccans. And then Culp is like even helping out with like the drills, because the first charge for the Wiccans is to kind of prepare the men for the eventual resistance and presumably the quelling of that resistance.
It's such an interesting task that's been given to them, because something's up, right? Yeah. Because Pormqual has ordered the Navy, essentially, to sail to Aran or Aran, and then ordered Coltane to then basically, like, they're pulling out all of the Malaz troops that are basically quelling this resistance. That's what's keeping it from happening so far. And so he's like, pull out the Navy, but we're going to leave Coltane and his people here for a little bit, and then you guys are to march down. And Coltane's like, why? This makes no sense.
Well, and there's something that's really interesting, and so I want to loop back to that, but I just want to kind of explain how these threads connect. So the last kind of scene that we have with them is they all kind of come together in a seemingly innocuous event where Sormo has summoned them because he's going to reveal something. But in order to reveal it, he has to open up his warren. And so he's got kind of like the power of prediction in a way. So he opens up his warren, and then what happens? They all of a sudden find themselves in the warren, all of them, because warrens are both places and powers of sources of magic, and they are now being onslaughted by Deavers and Soul Taken, who are using that warren to travel, because presumably, if there's an ascendant there, they don't care. And they are all of a sudden like fighting for their lives. And so this is kind of a really interesting event, because if you remember back to the Gardens of the Moon, people were using warrens to travel, but there was only one time that we ever had any hint that there was like other things in the warrens, other than just being told that like, yes, there's ascendants there. But when Piran first travels by warren with one of the claws, he notices that there's like tracks in the warren, like sand in the sands of the warren, and it's just like whatever, right? And then he's just like just keep moving. But this is like our first time where like we have people go to warren, and then they're just like attacked in the warren by these other creatures, and we get that real sense of like, yeah, these things are dangerous, and they gotta like fight for their lives. Eventually, Culp just like punches this kid in the face, like almost breaks his jaw, you know. But I mean, he's an old man technically, but yeah, just like socks this like 10-year-old in the face. And then that finally like, wakes him up, and they come out of the warren, and so we can kind of see like how that event is like changing things, right? Because they didn't see that coming, and so I thought that was a really really cool way to kind of really show right how the world is kind of changing in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really think Sormo Enath is such an interesting character, and yeah, there's like the parallels of because he's Wiccan and basically Coltane and Bolt. I can't remember which one, but we basically learn that the Malaz Empire killed off all of their warlocks, and they do this by impaling them on these spikes and just letting them slowly die. But in their culture, the Wiccan culture, crows can like come and like essentially take the souls of the warlocks and then reincarnate those souls into other Wiccans, which is very kind of like what's happening with Tattersail, like a rebirth almost, but different peoples.
Yep.
But yeah, I just thought that was awesome. Like, and like he's like an extra special one because like normally I think they said it's like one crow takes a soul and moves it, but like for Sormo it was like 10 or 15
like
crows.
11 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So we know that he's really special, but yeah, he's in this little boy's body right now, which is a fun visual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't wait to learn more about the Wiccans. But that also it's so interesting because it's like why are they choosing this Coltane and these people that they've oppressed for so long to lead this march? Like, what's up?
Well, and so that's the interesting thing I want to circle back to is they kind of mentioned like who better to quell a resistance than someone who led one, right? Because Coltane like led a resistance. That's why all the warlocks were executed. But then the thing is like, what are they training for?
Yeah.
Because when you hear about what they're training for, they're not training to quell a resistance. What they're being trained in is pulling bodies out of burning buildings.
Yeah, saving
people. Civilians. Yeah, like they're not being trained to stop resistance. They're essentially being trained to recover from one.
Yeah. Fantasy firefighters.
And so it's like it gives this aura of like, well, what was he brought in for? Because he's not being brought in to quell resistance because they expect it to happen. They expect the city to burn, right? And so that's for me is like really interesting, and it just reminds me a lot of like the scene from the End of Gardens where it's like all of the old has to burn away, and so it's like kind of an element of like, is she just letting this happen?
It definitely seems like it. Definitely seems like it. I also love Bolt. I love Bolt. Yeah. And he's just a no-nonsense, tell it like it is. I'm not scared of anybody. And with Malik Rel, who is basically like the spokesperson for Pormqual, who is there, basically just giving the orders. But he's like pretty corrupt too, right? Seems like...
We actually have no idea how Pormqual is in the picture, right? Because
he's just somewhere else.
Oh yeah, we've been told by Dooker that like everything that he's done was done by Malik, which is
exactly.
So it's like, is he even a real person?
I mean, it gives the vibes of like what's the character in Lord of the Rings that's like whispering into the king's ear?
So Wormtongue.
It's kind of giving that vibes for me. But Bolt's just like, hey, you're not the High Fist. Get the hell out of here. I don't want to see you anymore. Get out. And Malik Rel's like, "What? You can't talk to me like that." He's like, "I am talking to you like that. See ya." And then he just basically runs away like a little baby. And I thought that was so funny. Just like, dang, this dude does not care at all.
Nope.
And then, I think this also can kind of lead into a nice transition into our next group, because at the end of that conversation, or at the end of that big scene, or that big meeting, where we find out what Coltane's tasked to, which is, being fantasy firefighters, but also they're going to, seems like afterwards, it's like, save who you can, and then you're about to march down to Aaron.
Yep.
or Aaron or whatever.
Arm, yeah.
So we find that out, but then also Duker and Culp have a little side conversation where he's like, "Hey, there's another historian over on these Otataro Islands. I need you to rescue him," basically. Which I think could lead us into our next like grouping of people, which are so this historian who he wants them to save is Heberick, who we see in the prologue with Fellison in Baden. And the prologue's wild.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I've seen go harder than that prologue recently is the title screen of Oblivion Remastered. I mean, if we're being honest, like Oblivion Remastered is just like badass dude in badass armor in front of a burning Oblivion gate. It's just like super metal. And in the prologue, it opens up with like nobles and highborn and just people of privilege, or even just servants of people in privilege, just being rounded up, put into chains, right? And then they're just basically like marched through the mob, right? And they're like killing each other. Okay, this is not like the mob like throwing like lettuce and stones. Like the mob is like straight up like viciously attacking these prisoners, and these prisoners are fighting back, and the guards aren't doing anything about it.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting too that like once they hit so like this is like the march starts in the city, and this kind of continues Lacine's like purge of the nobles, and she pitches it to these, you know, lower class people in the city of like, here's your revenge. You want your revenge? Like, here you go. I'm gonna march them through, no rules, and they attack them and they attack them. But once they hit a certain point, they're out to like the farmers and the peasants. They don't even care. So it's just solely the people in the city that have this vendetta against the noble people, which I found really interesting. But yeah, they're marching them to slave ships. So it's like, yeah, you know, if they make it, great. They'll just help us mine the Otataro. If not, maybe the lower class citizens will be their thirst will be quenched, their murder thirst will be quenched.
And so, of course, the craziest reveal of this is that our sort of main character in all this is Fellison, who is the youngest sister of Piran. And so Piran's like my favorite character from Gardens of the Moon. And he's in the prologue. So I thought that was very cool too, right? He's a 10-year-old kid in the prologue for Gardens of the Moon, and now his youngest sister is in the prologue for
She's
for Deadhouse
pretty
Gates.
young, right? Is she like
she's like
14? 14, yeah.
So she turns, so this other thing is like time is kind of weird with Skullcap, but she turns 16 on Skullcap.
Okay.
So yeah, she's like 14, 15 in the prologue. I think she's like 14 in the prologue. And so, but she's in chains. And so she's also effectively heir to her house. And this is where the crazy reveal comes in. Piran is technically not heir to his house anymore. The heir to his house is Tavor, the older sister. And what we find out in Deadhouse Gates in the prologue is that Tavor has actually become the new adjunct to replace Adjunct Lorne, who dies in Gardens of the Moon. And so as such, she has completely, given away her title, given away her house, right? She's divorced herself of all of that and offered her sister, who is now the heir to that house, right, to prison, right? Basically just offered it all up. And so now Fellison is in chains because of her sister Tavor, who is again her older sister, and so it kind of just a crazy betrayal in all of this. And so then we find out that she's chained to Heberick, who I still wonder about that because he doesn't have hands, right? So I guess he's just chained by his feet.
It's just a trust.
Yeah.
They're like, all right, please don't leave. Just pretend you're chained up. Pretend your hands are stopping the cuffs.
Yeah.
No, it must be. I think they do mention it's his legs.
Yeah.
He's the only one that's his legs.
Yeah. And then Baden. And so Baden's then the one who's chained on the other side. And so we kind of get this like sort of moment where It is an unlikely friendship of the highest degree. And then the only other person we know about at that time is another woman from another family who is of high birth, who recognizes Felison just because she was she's the young daughter from another family, and so she just kind of kindly remembers her. And so then they get marched through the city, and so Felison and Hebrick are kind of crouching pretty close together, and then also right behind Bodden, who is like an absolute madman, right? I mean, this
Bon the
dude is like
Barbarian.
Bond the Barbie. As soon as the fight starts, this dude is like killing people left and right, grabbing people, breaking their necks, right, snapping arms and legs, just like crushing people, just like no mercy. He's like, we are making it through.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can kind of imagine, like, Fellison's just kind of crouching behind him, just as like blood is going everywhere, like screams are going everywhere, right? And this dude is just like tearing a path. And then we get the most like brutal scene of all, where at some point that old that old highborn lady who was kind on Fellison, she's been knocked out, and so sort of in this like rage, Bodden's just like, you want me to give you what you came for, and he decapitates her. Again, she's a prisoner, decapitates her and just like launches her head into the crowd
Brutally
which,
too. He like saws it off with the
yeah.
chains, like
Yeah.
slowly saws off her head.
Yep. And it has the intended effect. They have no idea what to do. They like the whole mob is just like stunned. And then that's finally when the guards like finally come in, and then they start
Party
like, breaking
foul.
things up. Yep. Yep. So I mean, absolutely brutal scene. And I mean, like I said, like how like talk about setting the tone for this book. It's like
I think only
if
it says like 1/5 or something of the people that started the march make it, or some
it's a
small
third.
amount.
It's a third. Yeah.
Okay, a
Yeah,
small
100
amount.
of the 300.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think less. That's just they just make it to the ships. Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
Probably less make it to
The islands.
the skull cap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one more thing I wanted to mention about the prologue, which we don't know how important it's going to be, but there is the figure walking towards them covered in flies.
Yep.
And when it finally gets to them, it kind of just like dissipates into a nobody. So we don't know if that's like a bad omen of what's to come. I don't really know what that means, but it feels like it's going to be somewhat important, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool nonetheless. A dude basically
Yeah.
covered in flies, and he dissipates, and there's no one
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah, and that was like a high priest of Hood, I think, or maybe not the high priest, but a
acolyte
priest
of Hood or something.
yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I also think I really like one Heberick and Fellison. We haven't really gotten much more of Bodden. But I like Bodden too. He's definitely not the star of that group for me.
Mm-hmm.
But Heberick, the way they described him, where he's literally just fully tatted,
Mm-hmm.
but like he's got like a tattoo of a boar over his
Yep.
own, like the whole body of the boar is tattooed like anatomically correct on him.
Yep.
Like the face on the face and the arms on the arms, and
Yeah.
that just kind of that image sounds awesome. Like
Yeah.
he looks as a historian too. Like he's just
Yeah.
I think it's because he's also a priest of Fenner or Fenir.
Fenrir, yeah, that's right. He
The
was like
boar.
a high priest of Fenrir,
Yeah, I
think.
can't remember what that god is for. It talks
I
about
don't know
it in the
either.
back.
But it also again kind of conjures those images of Soul Taken, where we have like an ascendant, but then like he's depicted by a boar,
Mhm.
right? And so that's just really cool. And like they're not just tats, like they actually there's like a blessing upon them, right? Because we talked about how like he heals really quickly
Yeah,
because of them,
and you can heal other
Um,
people too, right?
Mhm.
If he touches them.
and yeah, and then like when the flies were like swatting at him, they wouldn't touch the tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So it's really, really neat.
Yeah, I think that's super
so,
cool.
yeah.
And then I guess following their journey, they are shipped off as slaves to mine Otatarol on I think they call them the Otatarol Islands, but then within that, one of those mines is the Skull Cap or Skull. It might not be Skull Cap, but something like that, where Fellison is basically taken in by the prison camp leader, who is a prisoner himself, Benneth.
Yeah.
who
And it's, I guess it's worth, sorry to interrupt, but I guess it's
yeah,
worth
no,
mentioning that this is the element of the story where, you know, there's going to be like violence and brutality, but I would say that this is some of the content that is the hardest for many readers, I would suspect,
mhm.
because we, you know, Fellison is going to have a very traumatic and difficult time, and so this is, you know, depending on how you feel about certain elements of story, right? I mean, we are going to see a lot of like abuse and effectively rape and
Yeah.
things like that with Fellison, so it can be tough.
Yeah, if this doesn't
So
concern you as a reader, then I'm
yeah,
concerned for you. This isn't like a casual Sundays or anything.
yeah,
Like, yeah, I mean, she's a 15-year-old girl or 16, or I think you said
yep,
she turns
yep.
15, right?
She turned 16 while
She
she's
turns
in school.
16,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Yeah.
an
So
adolescent who
yep.
is effectively realized that her body is just another thing, or solely the only thing that she can wager with, and sell her body for safety, and not only for the safety of herself, but for the safety of her party members, Heberick and Bauden. And yeah, it's a traumatic experience because Benneth, you know, it's an interesting relationship where he constantly he definitely wanted her first, and then she realized that, and so she also becomes heavily addicted to a drug, which
Yeah,
is like an
Durang.
opioid.
Yep.
And so just yeah, I mean, and on top of that, she saves Heberick's life by
Mhm.
that's exactly, she's selling her body, saying, yeah, I'll sleep with you if you do this or this, and one of those things is moving Heberick from this mine to a different mine because he's basically incapable of doing the work they're making him do because of he's missing his hands, and he's an older man, I think, and so.
Mhm.
They do that. The mine collapses. Heberick is saved, and Fellison's feeling pretty good about that, right? She's protected her friends at all costs, at any cost. And to her, the saddest thing to me is that to her, she's just like, oh well, it's just my body.
Yeah.
She's so nonchalant about it, of just like, yeah, but this is the way it needs to be. So it could be worse. I'm just like, Jesus. But
Yeah.
then she goes in to see, and I think this is a lot of the drugs speaking at that point, but. Bauden comes back one night, and like him and Heberick are kind of whispering to each other in their bunks, and Fellison's feeling like super left out. Like, what the hell? Like, I saved you. I thought we were like family here, and you're
Mhm.
leaving me out of these conversations. And then she starts getting pissed and mad at Heberick and Bauden, and is no longer cares if they live or die. Basically, she's just like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Screw them. And I found her relationship with, I don't remember the names, but
I think Ball or Bala, something like that. You talking about that one?
that's the lady, like
innkeeper?
tavern innkeeper. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Who she's also like sleeping with for Benneth or whatever. But then there's the Malaz people there. So there's one guy that is younger who's
Prawl.
like, what's his name?
Prawl.
Prawl.
Yeah.
And
He's the one who quotes verse.
he quotes verse, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm interested to see where that goes. And then there's like the captain of that Malaz army that's monitoring them. And I'm blanking on exactly how that conversation goes, where she gets into trouble with. Yeah. Basically, he's like, "So you're a noble," and she's like, "No." He's like, "No, you're a noble." And she's like, "I'm not a noble. I swear it." Like. And then I can't remember why Benneth ends up beating her, essentially, and leaving her for dead.
Yeah. The way I kind of took that was that because he wanted something out of the conversation, right? Like he wanted to be in higher regard.
Benneth?
Yeah, and because this was like the prison, I mean, warden, essentially,
Mm.
and he wanted to be in higher regard, and part of it was offering Felisin, who is completely rejected basically by this warden, who also rejects Benneth. Now, I guess the kicker there is one of the things that Benneth wanted was not just regard and recognition, but he also wanted Baden to go free, because at this point Baden had been arrested. And of course, now Baden does go free later because he escapes and like kills multiple guards on his way out. But Benneth was hoping to get some recognition, to kind of get some favor, to get Baden released because there's something going on between them we don't quite understand yet. and then the warden just completely rejects all of that. And so Benneth kind of puts all of the blame on Fellison. And so the way I kind of took it was that Benneth has been having these, essentially, you kind of think about it, it was like went from like Fellison was going to be like his queen, and it was like just them, to then Fellison is becoming like deeply addicted to drugs. Sex is basically just a way to pass the time, and she's sleeping with a bunch of people. And so then you see the disregard of Benneth is now kind of just like offering her, right? He doesn't regard her
Oh
anymore.
yeah.
And then I think there's sort of like accrued feelings of just like complete and total disdain for her because of how she's not committed, not interested to anyone, and not interested in anyone.
Just like used up to him already.
Used up, right? And so then when this doesn't work, when he can't even offer her anymore to like the warden to be able to get like more recognition, then I think it's just all coming out now. He's just placing everything on her. It's all her fault, right? If she was just more with it, if she was just more present, right? If she was just more interested, then he would have everything that he wants. So he would be able to get favor. It's all her fault that it didn't go, that the conversation didn't go well. And I think that he's just taking it all out on her.
Yeah. So he beats her and leaves her.
Yep.
Beats her up in an alley, leaves her. I don't know for dead, but leaves her. And
basically for dead, right?
Yeah, basically for dead. And then Heberick comes and saves her. And I thought that was a nice moment and he's basically like, bro, you're addicted to drugs. Like, we got to fix this. And I think he, using that power, kind of touches her and heals her a little bit. I don't think he doesn't fix her addiction. But he does heal up those kind of surface wounds from the beating. But yeah, so I'm really interested to see where Culp's rescue mission of Heberick. We can talk about more when we talk about predictions, but I am interested to see how those storylines, they're clearly about to merge at some point at least. And then also, like, there's a lot of Otatarol they are mining there, where in like Gardens, there's not that much that's used. Like Lauren has her sword, I think, which has Otatarol in it, and then we know here the red blades like lace it through their armor, which I found really interesting. But we don't know really where.
Raraku Nam had some dust, so we know it like can get around.
It can get around, but where's the majority of this going? Is it just getting shipped back to like the capital or whatever? I think it's called Quantali, which is south of the Seven Cities, and that's where the Wiccans are from. And it seems like that's where Coltane is going to... well, I guess Coltane's going to Aran, which is north of that. But I'm guessing that's where the Otatarol is going. But, yeah, I love that storyline. Really hard to read, for sure. But I'm already very attached to Fellison and Heberick. Not so much Bowden, just because he's not been on the page as much. Hate Benneth. I don't know if we'll see Benneth much more. Maybe he'll get... Yeah, I'm not sure if we'll see much more of him. I think he kind of served his purpose in the story. But I'm feeling attached to Fellison and Heberick and what's going to happen with them if we get them out of there.
Yep.
Do we want to talk about... so we've talked about Fellison and her little crew. We've talked about Mappo, her little crew.
Yeah, so I think then we go back to the Arn connection. So Arn has significance for two other really important things that are going on in the story. And so one's character related and one kind of goes back to our recap for Gardens of the Moon. So Arn is special. Arn is one of the last cities that fell in the transition from the old empire to the new empire with Caliban and going into Lysine, who was known before as Suri. And so the significance of Arn is that we find out Suri, so Lysine, ordered the Talana Mas, who are an Eldering people, extremely deadly, like they're like almost like undead, basically.
Yeah, like skeleton warriors.
And they're very powerful, right? And she ordered them to essentially ignore the dictates of war, the decency of war, and just sack the town. And it was an absolute massacre, right? And so Arn was, like I said, just completely massacred. And so now is, of course, held by the Malaz. And there was another character who was also present during that massacre, which is Kalam. And so Kalam, of course, comes from Gardens of the Moon, and he's traveling with Fiddler and Absolar and Crocus. And I forgot you put Moby on there, our little Batral.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
He's
so
one of the boys.
one of the boys.
One of the crew.
Yeah. Dude, what if like what if Moby like secretly like has the soul of Crocus's uncle? Wouldn't that be wild?
Yeah.
So anyway, so they're all traveling together, but Kalam actually knows about this event in Aran and knows about the massacre because he was there. But of course, he doesn't know how it started. He just knows that it happened. And so Fiddler knows about it as well. But I don't know if I think Fiddler was also there. It seemed like
well, I
Fiddler
know
was
Column is of that crew, and of just some of the bridge burners. He's local to 7 cities.
Yeah,
that is where
but
he's from.
But I think he was there as like a claw.
Oh yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
But I think Fiddler was also there as like a bridge burner, or maybe before they were on the bridge burners.
Okay.
But I think both of them were there. And so then, of course, what's fascinating, so we can kind of talk about these two things in stride, is that there's also one more character who is there, in a sense, which is Absolar. And so, like, one of the coolest reveals, which happens around that 116 mark in my book, is that we find out that Absolar has a memory of Auron, which there's no way because it happened when she was a toddler. But she remembers it because she has the memories of the rope. And so what we find out is that the rope was also there, which shouldn't be possible because the Shadow Warren wasn't known at the time, and we figure out that the rope Cotillion is actually Dancer, who was Emperor Calivan's second in command and most trusted friend, and also head assassin for effectively head claw for the Empire. And so we're led to believe that the Ascendant Shadow Throne is actually Emperor Calivan, and the Ascendant Cotillion, the robe, is actually Dancer.
Which is crazy.
Which just blows over the entire thing of like, oh my gosh, like Lysine is like probably knows this, right? And is like operating against them. And while all that's taking place, like where is Duker going? He's going to Aaron. Like, where's Kalam going, right? He's going to Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what's he, of course, his ultimate mission, which I think is important to mention, right, is that their mission is to assassinate the Empress.
Mm-hmm.
But he's going to Aaron, which also seems to imply that the Empress is going to be going to Aaron, or at least there's going to be some advantage there for Column. And so now we have this really like interesting story with this crew that's now diverged into 2 groups, Column ahead and Fiddler and the rest of the crew behind. Where they're on their way to Aaron, and it all in a way kind of surrounds this event that took place a long time ago, 15 years ago, where Lysine effectively ordered the massacre of everyone there. For what reason we don't know, but we know that was one of the last times that the Emperor and Dancer, that was like one of the last major events before they were effectively killed or ascended, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
which, I think the coolest thing about this for me was that it didn't feel like Steven Erikson was writing this and be like, it'd be cool. It feels like when like those parts of Gardens of the Moon and like even when we first see Shadow Throne and the Cotillion, they're just talking about killing Lysine already. And like all of it makes sense, and it feels like it doesn't feel like a cop out or anything. I just thought that was really cool because it would already have been cool on its own, but the fact that like it felt it was intentional, this was the plan, and it's coming to fruition. Which, that's the type of reveal you don't get till the end of the 10-book series.
Yeah,
and we're 100 pages into book 2, and I'm just like, that changes everything. It changes everything, which is really cool, and it made me think about when they talk about the Deadhouse Gates in book 1 in Gardens of the Moon. They mentioned Deadhouse Gates and how they work briefly. I don't remember exactly, but I just remember thinking at the time, like, I wonder if Calanved went into one of those at some point, which like maybe that is how they ascended or something. Maybe it's correlated somewhere. But I found that really interesting. But yeah, really cool reveal. I think it was a crazy... I literally read it and I was like, what? I need to reread this sentence and make sure I read the right thing. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. But yeah, let's talk about that group. So Fiddler, Column, Absolar, Crocus, and our boy who loves to bang, Moby.
Moby.
Right? At some point, he's just off like mating.
Yeah. We don't. Yeah. We. I know. I was thinking back to Silicon Valley. I don't know if you ever watched Silicon Valley.
It's been a long time.
There's a scene in Silicon Valley where their investor walks in, and it's just like all of them, right? And they're all software developers, like nerds, right? And so he just looks at all of them. He's like, "Hey," and then he looks at the guy who's like the most awkward, who's also like the business guy. He's like, "This guy fucks."
That's Moby.
That's
Moby. Yeah.
So you cracked me up. So one thing I wanted to kind of open up, since we're talking about this crew, Fiddler is, I think it's kind of cool. Fiddler's getting a lot of attention in Deadhouse Gates. I think really in a way, like he's kind of one of our more developed characters.
Main character status for me, pretty much.
Yeah, which is really cool. I really like seeing how, because Fiddler was kind of a goofball. I mean, really, like he's kind of a goofball. He's even sort of depicted in kind of a goofball fashion, like has a cap because, he's managed to not blow all of his hair off, right? And it's just like, so he's kind of a goofball, but like now we're really starting to see his character develop in a really cool way.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, like it even opens up, in my opinion, with being a goofball, because they run up against this like really massive, the Soul Taken,
like
and
worm,
of course, what does he do?
creature.
Yeah, it's like a centipede that moves through the water. Like what? And then of course, like he's just like, you know what we're gonna do? Let's just blow it up.
Yeah. He has a freaking one-liner too that he says after they kill it. He's like, I can't remember exactly what he says, but I'm like, he says it out loud. It's like, you mess with the wrong sailors or something like that. I'm like, oh, Fiddler, come on, buddy. But it's hilarious.
And it's just, I love seeing it. And so, but one thing I did want to mention, because I wondered if this stood out for you. I've only had two scenes that really, that stood out as being slightly awkward, but I'm totally rolling with it. Which was when he meets the Tello or the Tallow.
Yeah, Spirit
who
Walker.
are the Spirit Walkers, who are, so what we learned about them is that they were a city that worked kind of like Erin, where it needed to, the Empire was going to conquer it, but they surrendered rather than trying to hold a siege, trying to hold up against the siege. And that was probably what spared them, right? Because presumably the same thing would have happened to them that happened to Aaron. And so then we meet the guy who was like the leader of that crew of those people, who is like a spirit talker or something like that. Like their powers in song. But I thought this was kind of interesting because, and this is why I wanted to mention at the beginning that really felt like this was sort of like a classical fantasy meeting mythology. Is there is an element to where this is very much, it could feel very much contrived. Like, oh, Fiddler happens to fall upon two young girls that are being preyed upon, happens to rescue them. They just so happen to be the granddaughters of this man who can just so happen to bless him with the conch shell, the magic conch.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my gosh, this is so like, all of this is just so contrived. But this is the thing that I love about this type of genre, is it's like, well, yeah, okay, it could be contrived, but also don't forget that we are very much in a world where gods like to be at play.
Sure.
Right? So it's like, it might be contrived, yes, or there might be a lot more going on and we just don't know yet. Right? And so I think that is one of the cool things about the book, is that for some, in some sense, you kind of just need to let things play. And I think that is really, really cool.
Yeah.
It's a
big character moment for Fiddler too, I think. Yeah. Like, he probably shouldn't do it, even though, it's going to expose him a little bit by going, because I think it's a perfect time to talk about the Red Blades, because the Red Blades are an interesting group that are like locals that want to be like, they're almost like, dare I say, Proud Boys. They're like locals that are fighting for the Malaz Empire. They're like local sheriffs that they think they have the authority over everybody, and they suck. And so, yeah, they're just running through this town, murdering everybody. And Fiddler's like, I'm an outlaw. I shouldn't expose myself here, but he just can't. He can't let that happen, and I think that's a big moment for Fiddler, him rescuing that. And yeah, I think that's his reward, which we don't know. Maybe I don't know. We don't know about the Kong, right? Too much about it.
No, we
So-
don't really know anything about it.
And
We know that Fiddler sees it as dangerous, which is interesting.
yeah,
right?
he's gonna sell it, right? He's like, I'm done. Like because dangerous because he doesn't want to get robbed and killed, right?
Right. But like he also doesn't, in some sense, doesn't know what it could do.
Yeah.
But then this is again kind of getting into that point I was making is like, so his first opportunity to sell it, he doesn't sell it, right? And why doesn't he sell it? Because everyone has been killed. So his first opportunity to sell it would have been at the keep, right? Which is because they're trailing behind Kalam, right? But they can't go to the keep because everyone at the keep was murdered because Kalam is being chased by Red Blades.
Yeah,
Right? And so it's just like-
it's so good.
Yeah.
That whole setup too. I mean, might as well talk about that because
Yep.
he's part of the crew. So yeah, Kalam. I don't know how he gets word that this informant is there. I can't remember.
It's his contact.
Oh yeah,
so
so he just that's the spot.
It's his contact. The informant owes him. That's the spot.
Okay,
So,
so yeah,
this
it
is
goes
him,
there.
This is him operating like he used to.
Mm-hmm. And the informant essentially gives him the book of the apocalypse.
He takes it from him, actually, right? He's
He's
he drops
threatening
on the
him.
floor.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
basically
like
threatening him.
him.
Because the guy's like, hey, it's been long enough, like, we're even. And Callum's like, no, I don't think so. Yeah, you're going to need to give me something because I need safe passage across the desert, across this holy desert. And so what better safe passage than carrying the most important book to this cult or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Callum gets that book, leaves, and then who strolls up 5 minutes later but some red blades
Yeah.
also talking to this informant. And this informant's pissed because he didn't want to give Kalam anything. And he's like, all right, I'm going to tell these red blades who I gave the book to, where he's going. So basically, just trail him, stay an hour behind so he doesn't see you. And yeah, then I can't remember why they want to kill him. Just because he's an outlaw? Do they know?
So no, the way that I was understanding is the informant is like in the pocket of the red blades, and the book. The whole reason the informant has the book is because it's bait. That the red blades. So Tenebralta and Lastara Yil, and then there's like Aptar or something. We don't really know much about them, but like their charge was killing the Sheik, which we'll talk about in a second.
Okay, yeah.
And finding the location of the Sheik and killing the Sheik, but they don't know where the Sheik is. The only thing that they know is that the Sheik, she wants the book of the apocalypse. And so the informant has the book of the apocalypse. He gets his hand on it, and it's going to be bait. But then the problem is that Kalam kind of interrupts this. And so this is what's kind of interesting is because I think in some sense, like, I think the informant is very happy that Kalam is there because in some sense it's like, who better to guarantee that the book makes it to Sheik than one of the most highly trained assassins from the Empire, essentially second only to Dancer, whose also birthright is the Seven Cities, right?
Dancer's is?
No, Kalam.
Oh,
He's
yeah,
born
I
with-
see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like essentially one of the best living assassins from that place, and is also from the Seven Cities. And so it's like who better to really have the book as bait, so to speak. And so as far as I can tell, I think the Red Guards are really only after him to silence him, is what it seems like. And I think that's also the same reason why they like killed everybody at the keep. It's just that like nobody can know about this book, right? Like the Sheik's got to die, and everyone who's been anywhere near this book has got to die. That's what it seemed like to me.
Yeah.
At least.
And that kind of leads us where Kalam and Fiddler meet back up. And basically, I think Kalam tells him his plan. I got to go do this by myself, essentially. And Fiddler's like, all right, we'll trail behind, basically, a day or two behind. I can't remember how long. But yeah, so they go on their path to Kalam's going to deliver this book to the Sheik, which I think is perfect transition into our next group. But real quick, I did want to quickly mention an interesting thing that happens at that keep. Or at a keep. I think it might not be that keep. I think it was at Hisar, maybe, where the Navy is like more red blades. Because I think this is from we get it from Duker and Culp, where
Yeah.
more
Yeah, so
red
red
blades
blades are
get
lost.
delivered.
Yep.
And there starts to basically like the people, the rebellion are kind of starting to fight with the red blades a little bit, and there's like a standoff, and then all of a sudden all these like Wiccans appear,
Yep.
and they kind of calm the situation, which is really interesting because now it's like, okay, are these guys working for Coltane? Or at least for me it was. I was like,
Yep.
what are these guys doing here? And they were ready. You know, I think it revealed them when they didn't want to be revealed.
Right.
So I think that's really interesting too. And I just want to talk about that because I don't know when we'd get back to them. And I just thought that was an interesting another layer. There's like 12 layers.
And I think the intention for that, like, I think it really was intended because, as far as we can tell, like the red blades are Malazan, but like they're kind of doing whatever the hell they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Coltane's a fifth, so he's like in charge of order. And as far as we can tell, like the red blades are brought in, and like Coltane was like straight up gonna have them be ambushed and murdered. Like he just was like the market's there. He's like, if they do what they've been doing, if they go to attack the market, we're just gonna straight up kill all of them.
Yeah. Which I don't
Which is,
know
like,
if
it's again kind of crazy because
Yeah,
he's
'cause
like the newly elected fist of Malaz, right?
and we don't know how Malaz would react to that, killing people also working for Malaz. So it's really it's interesting to see what that might mean, the implications of that. But yeah, going back to Fiddler, I love Fiddler, him like immersing himself in the culture and posing as someone of that culture. And like every time he's near like a guard and they mention the Malaz, he like spits and stuff. And like, I think that's great. And then we can just talk their journey really.
The best scene, of course. So he's like a Grawl or a Gruul, I think. And so, but his horse is actually like an appropriate horse for what he's posing as. It's a Grawl horse.
Badass horse, it seems like.
Yeah, there's that scene, right? Like even a Grawl horse knows if he's been insulted.
Yeah.
And so he like bites the face off of this guard.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The best scene ever. And of course, all the people around it, like, they don't like these guards at all because, so this happens at like along the journey, they're stuck outside the city. Oh, that's actually So that's actually the first time he could have sold it. I got ahead of myself.
Oh yeah.
That's the first time he could have sold it, but I guess it is the second. Because we're still there, but he couldn't sell it there either because the city is currently in a bloodbath because people are just going crazy and it's a rebellion. There's a rebellion going on, and it's like our first uprising where people are uprising against the Malazans. But of course, these people outside are really upset because they want to be able to move freely, and they can't because these guards are like keeping them out because of this rebellion.
They're just like, let it play out. We're just gonna let them. We're just gonna let them go in and kill everybody.
Yeah. And so, but they're being like just being dicks about it, and so the horse bites his face off, literally, and then people are like cheering.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh hell yeah, this horse is awesome!
This horse is awesome!" So they all want the horse. People are like offering their daughters.
Yeah,
and stuff. And then he just looks at him. He's like, "You're not even worthy to smell the farts of my horse." And this is the best line in the entire book so far.
It's so good. Yeah, and yeah, I mean they're like, yeah, he's like, "I'll allow you all to pay me 1 coin to touch it once."
Yeah, and he doesn't even let them touch it. He just takes a beer. He takes a beer skin that's been sitting next to the horse, right, and just throws it at them. He's like, "Here's my warm beer. It's been warmed by the belly of my horse."
Oh, it's so good. And that's also amazing. We kind of learn, like, I think he accidentally he thinks he's because they're basically asking like, well, what are you doing here? Because and their cover is that Crocus and Apsalar are a newly married couple, and they're on a pilgrimage to see all of the 7 cities. That's like the birthright or whatever of people from the 7 cities. But he overspeaks or something, and he almost like slips saying that he is also outcast among his people or something, to where they're like, well, they're coming, and if they see you, they're gonna hunt you down. His like the type of people he's posing as, the Grawl or whatever.
Yeah, because I think effectively, I can't remember the other details either, but I think effectively his cover kind of depends upon him not running into.
Because they'll suss him out.
Yeah, exactly.
No problem.
And so, but what he didn't realize is that these people that were outside the gates that he goes to see, that they've actually recently been with a Grawl, and those Grawl are coming back. And so the one of the leaders is able to suss them out too. But that's not a concern for him, right? It's like, your business is your own. But we kind of get this interaction where it's like, you probably should know, by the way, that that they're going to be hot on your trail. Like they're coming through, and like they will kill you if they see you.
Yeah.
Um,
So that leads them to go into the city right away.
Yeah, they go into the city under rebellion. And we see some so earlier I thought about maybe opening up with like favorite scenes. But I think this kind of gets to my favorite scene, which the horse comment, the horse farts is so great.
That is really funny. Yeah.
But I just thought one of the coolest scenes for the crew was when they encountered the 6 rapists. And so now, to be fair, again, harsh elements of story, but in some sense, well, not in some sense, I mean, legally speaking, those men were attacking young girls, who, if those young girls had been Malazan, technically it would have been illegal for Fiddler to attack them, although that probably wouldn't have stopped him. But the girl wasn't Malazan, right? It's just they're just 6 men in the middle of a massacre of this town, and they're just doing whatever they want to do, right? And so, but that means that there's opportunity now where like Fiddler and the rest of them, they're like justified in killing these guys. And they don't say a word. Like the crew, they don't say a word. They just stroll right through this crowd. And as they are passing this crowd, and they're right in the middle of this crowd, because these 6 rapists are on foot, and the crew's on horseback, and as they're walking through, Fiddler just pulls out a blade and just like stabs one of the guys in the back of the head. And immediately, again, without communicating, like Absolar and Crocus are just right on top of the rest of them. It's just sort of this unspoken understanding of like, none of us are going to let this happen.
Yeah.
And I just thought like that was really the first moment where like as a crew, it was just like we really see like the crew like operating as a crew, all on the same instinct, all with the same intention, all backing each other up, and with no qualm. Crocus doesn't even complain about it, right?
Yeah, and he's been the complainer.
Yeah, he's been the complainer.
I feel like that's why I like the conch shell, him rescuing those 2 girls, because it really sets up Fiddler's character for this moment of like, oh, well, of course he would. He's gonna because it's a risk. It's a huge risk for them to do this. Like they're blowing their cover essentially, and they just don't care. They're gonna do what's right. And yeah, I thought that was a great scene as well. But that's kind of really the last we see of them, right? Then they leave the city and they're on the path following. I don't know. At that point, because Kalam's going into into Raraku.
Yeah, there's essentially a detour, right? Like Kalam's kind of taking a detour around right through the desert, so they're gonna effectively, they're walking two paths the same destination. At this point, yeah, they're not really following this path because I don't think they're trying to go through the desert the same way.
So yeah, I think that leads us to our last group, if you will. Or I feel like we have done a decent job of just incorporating groups and plot. So we've covered a lot of the plot here as well. But the last, major plot points and major group, which, do you want to take it?
Yep. So Kalam is bringing the Book of the Apocalypse to Sheik, who we've kind of already mentioned, who is a young sorceress, but a very powerful one, who has essentially there's this prophecy that's foretold that she will bring about the apocalypse which is kind of interesting because there is this kind of thing that can happen in mythology where there's a story, but then the different renditions of the story kind of change the details. So there's like an element of like, well, the Sheik will read from the book, and then there's like this element of, well, she just has to open the book, right? And it's like not really clear like what the preconditions are for the apocalypse. But all we know is that if the Sheik gets her hands on the Book of the Apocalypse, she'll bring forth the whirlwind, right? It's like the term that they use, which is essentially the apocalypse. And we don't really know what that means, but apocalypse is never usually a good thing, so to speak. So, but we know it's going to be definitely like a change. And so now when we meet the Sheik, We see some very interesting characters. We see a Leoman, I think maybe his name is Leoman, and then a Toblakai, who are very, very fascinating. This is kind of a classic trope, I think, with a lot of fantasy that plays in the desert. Is typically like when you have like a desert fantasy, there's always these like mysterious, they're typically like mysterious like peddlers, but in this case, they're not peddlers, but like these mysterious warriors with mysterious arts, and a lot of that comes back to the like Hashashin or like assassins, where we get assassins who were like men of very unique, like people actually, I should say, of like very unique gifts and very unique arts and very like unique ways of killing. And we kind of see that with these two characters, where you have this like Toblakai who's like big, like really big, but yet he like walks on sand as if as if he was just as light as a feather, like you can't hear him
Because Kalam can't hear him, and like
yeah, he sneaks up on Kalam, and Kalam's like,
crazy.
"Oh my gosh, like you must be enchanted." He's like, "Nope."
yeah,
And
be
then
deaf.
he carries a sword made of wood, right? But it like he'll smash through armor with it because he's so strong. And then we have a Leoman who's really young, but like basically is having a midlife crisis around the Sheik. I think he's effectively like almost as young as she is, but he talks to her like he's 40 something years old. He's just griping at her all the time. And then, but then he's got, which, okay, to be fair, like, I mean, I know I like kind of nerd out on this kind of stuff, but like, if you could make an Elden Ring character with dual Morning Stars, most OP freaking build you could ever make for a fantasy genre. Like Morning Stars are like crazy OP, and to have two of them that can be like successfully wield in
Are
in
Morning Stars
unison
the
and-
one that's like a baton and then like a chain and then the like,
a baton
spiky
and
ball?
chain, a spiky ball, right?
Okay,
And this is what makes them so OP is because like if you were to have a shield to block, first of all they got spikes on them, so they can literally spike into the shields. Okay, but if you were to have a shield that could block, like one of the problems with shields, you have to raise them and it blocks your vision. But then the thing with that is like you're willing to do that because it's going to collide with right your shield, and so you're going to block the attack. But a Morningstar can loop over the shield.
Yeah, or a sword, even, right?
Yep. So it can loop over the shield. If you try to block with a sword, it can wrap the sword and yank it away. And so, of course, the downside of Morningstar is that typically you have to like swing your momentum to really get that shot in. And so a lot of people will have like a shield, so you can like shoot it in and then like block. But like he's got two, so basically he's like a super ninja with like two like nunchucks. He's like waving everywhere, but they've got spiked balls on the end of them that can just like kill you in one hit. And so it's just like if you try to block one, he just smacks you with the other one.
He's elite, and seems like an elite crossbowman as well.
Yeah, and his quarrels. I mean, true to a crossbow. I mean, he like especially well, and keep in mind too that like I mean I don't know how much like physics plays into this world, but you don't want to shoot somebody point blank with a crossbow. It takes time for a crossbow to build up to its full velocity. Like you want to get somebody like at yardage, but he shoots a guy pretty close, and it completely crushes the armor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, absolutely destroys this guy. So like I mean, these guys are not guys to be messed with. I mean, they are like we don't know where they come from, but like they are insanely deadly, and very mysterious, and it's very cool to kind of see that. And they're there to protect the Sheik.
Yeah,
and so
essentially your bodyguards.
Yeah, but this does lead to Kalam gives her the book, and just as was intended, she has to go open / read the Book of Dawn, which she does. But because Tenebralta and Lestara, these red guards, so it's 15 red guards in total. They're chasing the Kalam's tail. They are able to set up a position, and Lestara fires a crossbow bolt and kills the Sheik, right? Hits her right in the head after she opens the book. And this is what leads to this engagement between Toblakai, Leomen, and those red guards, where they all are like, well, we're gonna go claim that body, right? We're gonna go kill these guys, so they don't know what happened. And then the 15 red guards charge in, and they just get brutally just wailed on. People are getting killed left and right. The Toblakai just like crushing one person after another. Leomen takes out a guy with a crossbow, swinging his morning stars left and right. Like these two guys against 15 don't give any ground, and they just send all of the red guards packing, right? And the only reason really like the red guards just aren't completely wiped out is just because they won't leave the body.
Yeah, And if I remember, none of the 3 named red guards that we have met perished, right? All 3 got out?
No.
Or was
All 3 got out.
Yeah,
But
okay.
Lestara got hit in the head really hard. So we do see that where she like tries to block with her shield, I think.
Mhm.
And the Morningstar just like, or maybe it was Toblikai, I can't remember, but it just like someone like basically broke through her shield and like hit her in the head and knocked her out.
Mhm.
But then her like a couple of her red guards drag her away.
Yeah.
And then then she's like waking back up, and then Tenebralta is like, okay, you're up, get back on your horse, go chase after Kalam.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Which is important because Kalam wasn't there for that fight, because after basically shows up and the 2 bodyguards are like, well, who are you? And he's like, I brought the book. And they're like, yeah, sure you did, bud. And then they give it to the Sheik, and she's like, no, yeah, this is it. So here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to gift you this like 3-legged giant demon thing to accompany you. And I from what I remember, Kalam is just like, no, please. And she's like, no, he's going with you. And so he heads off.
And that creature, I believe, is from the Shadow Worn.
It seems like it, yeah. Some crazy demon.
Yeah.
I didn't even know how to like picture it, but I know it's like 3-legged. So I don't know, but it's really tall, or it's large too.
Yeah.
But that's like the gift, I guess, for bringing the book. And then she sends him on his way, and he's like, "See ya." Like first he's like, "I want safe passage." Maybe that's why she gives it to him. Like this thing is gonna protect you.
Yeah, it's gonna guarantee you safe passage.
Yeah, out of the desert and to Aran. But and then the bodyguards are there with Sheik after she's shot in the head, which was crazy because I didn't see it coming, and it's very just abrupt. Like the thing stuck out of her head, and I was like, "Wait, the what?" I was like, "Wait a minute, what?" So that was crazy, but really cool. But it's one of those things where Toblikai is like, "Let's go." I mean, they foiled it, and I think Leomin's like, "No, the prophecy said she has to open the book at sunrise, and she did that. So we're gonna just chill here and wait and see what happens."
Yeah. And it's kind of implied that she might be coming back.
Yeah, she might be coming back. Well, I think that's let's I think we've really I'm looking at our plot thing here real quick, our notes, to see if there's anything else that we should mention real quick before we get into predictions, because we are coming up at an hour and 45 minutes. So if we can hit that 2-hour mark, I think that's probably a good place. So we did all this. I think we covered really everything throughout that. Yeah. So I think let's jump into our predictions, or as far as like favorite parts or favorite characters. Honestly, for me, the highlight was it sounds like for me it's the prologue. I thought the prologue was awesome, and it doesn't go downhill from there or anything. I just like it just starts off with such a bang, and the hype was huge, and I think I'm really excited about everything else that got set up. But as far as like cool parts, that was it for me. And then favorite character, I think it's Fiddler right now, which is maybe a little cliche, but I really like Fiddler.
Yeah, I think for me, like the thing that's been kind of exciting, and so I'll go on. We didn't mention this. I'll just go and mention this because it kind of goes into future predictions. But
we can go if you want to just roll into it. Go roll into it.
Yeah. So Ikariam and Mappo, when they get in the Shadow Temple, they're kind of just left to their own devices, and they discover in one. I don't want to call it a basement because the whole thing is like basically carved out of the inside of a mountain, if you will, like a massive plateau. And so they're like, but they're going one of the lower levels, and they find a room that essentially acts like a mausoleum in a way, but it's clearly like as if the Shadow Temple tried to cover up something that was already there, and they realize that one of the walls is hiding a hallway, and they tear down the bricks of that wall, and they discover like claw marks in the walls. And they can sense warrens, right, that are present, and they know that they shouldn't go in, and they're wondering if that's one of the gates, right, or if it's related to like the Path of Hands, and that's in a Shadow Temple, and Shadow Throne is essentially the most recent ascendant And we don't know a whole lot about Ascendants other than the fact that they occupy these warrens. And so for me, that's the most like compelling part of the story right now, and I'm very interested. Like I actually really like Ikariam. I really like this aspect where he's like genius, philosopher, historian, mage, barbarian, right?
All.
He's everything, but like he's also been alive. I mean, like if you could play Oblivion for 1,000 years, I mean, you would be maxed out at every category,
Yeah.
right? Like that's Ikariam. He's like, dude, I've been playing this RPG since it came out, man. Like,
Yeah.
so,
But it's coupled with
so
his blackouts though, which are
yeah,
concerning.
yeah, and so there's this element of like kind of his identity is being eroded, and so I'm like very interested in what's happening there. And I kind of like for me, like I really like Fiddler, but I also feel I'm very interested in these two characters. I think I'm the most interested in their storyline right now.
Yeah.
And I really want to know about the Path of Hands, and I really want to know about this gate that they found. And so, one of my predictions I kind of put down was like, I really feel like in this book right now, I don't know, obviously my predictions have been like 0 for 100 right now, but I really feel like an Ascendant's going to die in this book. And I
Okay.
feel like we're going to get a new one too. And I
Okay.
think Shadow Throne is going to be at the center of that. And I don't know if that Ascendant's going to be Ikariam or if it's going to be Mappo or if it's going to be somebody else, maybe Felasin or Heberic. I don't know if it's going to be like a
Moby.
throwback from like Ralagnam, right? Maybe Moby is already an Ascendant. I don't know.
He's
I
Lacine
mean,
the
he's
whole
Ascendant in my
time.
book. Uh, but yeah, I really feel like we're gonna get a new one, and I think that it's gonna be, I think that Shadow Throne's gonna be involved in it somehow, and I think it's gonna be an inversion where Shadow Throne, like the Emperor, like they ascend prior to, like the scene taking power, and I think the new Ascendant is gonna be directly related to this, like the chaos of just everything erupting
Mm-hmm.
and everything like falling apart.
Yeah. So I have a question. Do you think my understanding, or I guess maybe just my what I thought was that the Path of Hands was a cult for this apocalypse? Do you think that's something separate?
I thought the Path of Hands was related to the Convergence, which is also like an omen because I mean, as far as we know, the people who know the most about the apocalypse are the people who are also sorry about the Convergence are the people from the desert. So
But
there
isn't the
seems to be a kind
convergence
of
kind of
relation.
for the I thought all of that was intertwined together, kind of.
I think it is an entangle, but so far I think they are being listed as two separate events.
Okay.
So there's like the Book of the Apocalypse with the whirlwind, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's the Convergence, which is just that's what all the
Gathering of
soul
all the.
taken, yeah, and the Devers are, but it's the same culture that knows about both,
Okay.
and
Okay.
so I think there is an entanglement to a
Okay.
very high degree in that. It kind of all relates to this place,
Nice.
um, and so yeah, I'm very excited to see how that all works out.
Yeah. I have really simple predictions because yeah, I just don't even I was like, let me think about what I think's gonna happen, and I'm like, I have no idea other than do I think the apocalypse is gonna happen or what they call the apocalypse or the
Yeah.
whirlwind? Yes, yes I do.
Yeah.
I think what she saw was enough. Was just the
Yep.
opening of the book at dawn. I do think Culp is going to successfully rescue at least Heberic and Fellison. I don't know if
Mm.
Bodden's gonna make it out of that. But I think at least Heberic and Fellison. And then I wrote one more and I put Deadhouse Gates.
Yeah,
I
was
think
gonna
it's
mention
pretty
that.
safe to say there's going to be some Deadhouse Gates. So I can at least get one right. I had to go for the, what do they call it? Not the fastball. Maybe
Yeah.
it is a fastball. The easy pitch,
Yeah, the easy pitch.
whatever they call it.
Yeah.
Sports.
You
Softball.
need that
It's a softball.
underhand.
That's what it is.
You need that underhand,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Just give me one so I can feel
Yep.
some kind of success. So at some point in this book, we're gonna see Deadhouse Gates.
Yep.
And
So,
Coltane's gonna march. So, not to brag, but I
So,
might go two for 4.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you'll definitely be outbatting me for sure. So I know we're kind of coming up on well, certainly one of the longest videos we've done. We're kind of coming up on that 2 hour mark. Do you want to quickly just say what you thought based on the cover of your book? Because I couldn't see the cover, but I would assume it's different than mine.
Yeah. So this is technically not the cover
Come on.
cover. Yeah. So the actual dust jacket, I guess, is what they call it. is more like yours. It's the three people riding on the horses,
Mhm.
and I think that that's Coltane leading
Yep.
the march. This seems like I don't know if I want to show because I think it's a spoiler.
Okay.
But it looks like I'll just show it because you probably won't be able to see who's
can't see
on
it.
it from this far away. Oh yeah, you can't see it at all. But it's like three people approaching this giant like temple thing.
Mhm.
So I have an idea of who I think that is. One of them I know because I can tell in the picture. But it does feel like it's maybe a bit of a spoiler. But I mean, they put it on the front of the book, so I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, and so I was just based on mine. The whole thing that is in mine is like there's also the hounds and the dust cloud.
Yeah, huge hounds.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and so the only the hounds for right now are like the most significant thing with the hounds is that most of the servants of the Shadow Warren are hounds.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like I think that we learn a lot about the Shadow Warren in this book.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited for that.
I'm very excited for that. I'm also like secretly hoping. My secret hope is that Piran, because again, my favorite character from Gardens, that he comes in because at the end of Gardens, he was kind of referred to as like a hound. Because he had
he's
that-
like a brother of the one
Yeah.
he saved, essentially.
Yeah, the one he saved, but then he also like kind of loses it. He kind of goes into like almost like a werewolf like rampage when he gets grabbed after being pulled into the warren with the Jagu Tyrant, and he's like getting grabbed by like the roots, and he's just like literally like biting at the roots to like rip them apart so they don't drag him in, and he has to be like calmed out of it. And so there's like something that's happened to him because of him saving those hounds.
Yeah.
So
Real quick, I did want to mention before I forget two other, or I guess three other things. One was the history of the Erliton or whatever, where Fiddler and them land. I just thought that was really cool world building of like the city. They just keep building cities on top of other cities, on top of other cities, on top of other cities. And it's just like this giant hill of city ruins, which I thought was awesome. And then I did want to mention quickly, there were two parts that I found I didn't like, and I hope they don't continue. And they are both the same thing. One was Heberick being like, don't you fall in love with Felison. I'm like, ain't she 14 or 15, bro? And you're old.
yeah.
And then Fiddler, the same thing with Absalar. And I'm like, aren't these girls extremely young? And it just seems so out of character, and I don't get why. And how old's Fiddler? Too old. From what I understand, we don't know his age.
30s.
Yeah, because
He's
he's like 10 years older than Piran in the prologue of Gardens,
I
and
think the way you can kind of assume with Fiddler is that he's been in the Malazan Empire now for 15 years. So chances are he probably went in as a young teenage like boy, so probably went in as like 14 or 15, if not a little bit older. So I would assume that he's 30s, like he would be like young
Too
30s
old.
to like mid 30s. Yeah.
too old to be like, don't you fall in love with this 15-year-old girl? I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, like why is this in here? Like I don't see the point. And
Yeah,
it is a romantic love too, or it's implied. It's not like don't get attached, right? Because then I could see that, right?
Yeah.
I get that they're family or whatever, and I could see that like don't get attached because it might hurt you. But it's very specifically like don't fall in love with.
Yeah.
And Heberick's like looking at Felison all like in a bit of a sexualizing way, and I found it just weird, and I just didn't understand why it was there, and I really, really hope it's just a one and done, gone. We never think of that again, because I really don't want it to go down that path for either of them, because I really like Heberick and I really like Fiddler, but I don't want him to become Diddler, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think part of the difficulty with it is it's always because it can be very weird, and it's like there's not necessarily a point to it unless unless it's like something about their character, like maybe a flaw they overcome or a part of the story. But at the same time, I think one of the reasons why we see these elements is because it was normal. Like if you have a 14-year-old girl who's marries like a 50-year-old man and it's the medieval times, like that's actually normal.
Yeah.
And in fact, like the idea, this goes back. I mean, it's not just even medieval times. I mean, even thousands of years. I mean, Greek and Roman times. Like the idea that you would have an 18-year-old girl get married, like she's already an old maid if she's 18
Yeah.
and unmarried. And to have like a 14-year-old marry, like let's say a young 20, like a man of youth, let's say, like, and to be fair, I do appreciate that they refer to men in their young 30s as men of youth. But like to have like a 14-year-old marry, like let's say a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old, like he better be a prince or really rich, because they're considered like unestablished. Like it's even like a question of like how are you going to pay the dowry?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what do you have? You're 18,
Mm-hmm.
and so like someone who's like 14 or 15 marrying anyone like younger than 30 or 40, that's like an abnormal thing actually,
Yeah.
right? For that time and place. And this is like a fantasy, so it's kind of meant to be more of medieval. But then for like for like modern sensibilities, it's also like, well, even if that's the reality, like we're telling a story, so it should be something that's relevant for the story.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I get that. And I've read books where it does feel more natural in the world I'm reading, but there's no other mentions of anything like that in all of Gardens of the Moon and any of Deadhouse Gates except for this, really. And to me, I just wonder, like, it just didn't feel necessary. And if anything,
Yeah.
it stood out to me as like a ugh, like ugh, for characters I really like, and that's frustrating to me because I'm like, man, I don't need that. If anything, Heberick, I felt like it was going to be like a father-daughter loving relationship, friendship, and now I'm like grossed out about it. So I don't know. I hope it doesn't go that way, but I guess we'll see. That's my prediction for I really hope. Please don't, Steven
Yeah.
Erickson. So we'll see. We'll see. But
Yeah.
other than that, I think that's a good place to wrap. Do you have anything? I mean, I think you can just assume, viewer, if you're here, prose is always going to be top tier. World building's always going to be top tier. Dialogue, always going to be top tier. You know, I think these discussions are more about us just gushing a little bit and
Yeah.
getting some clarity on aligning what we think happened and making those predictions. Yeah, I think Steven Erickson's on his A game throughout this whole series. I would imagine if Gardens is the worst of the worst, then you know, I think we're in for a real treat. So we'll
Yeah.
probably not talk too much about prose and specifically prose. I would say world building. We'll probably talk about character. Obviously, we'll talk about, but
Yeah.
I did want to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything
Well,
else
and I
to
was just,
say?
yeah. So I was just saying, last thing I'll say is that, one of the things I really hope that conversations like this can do for people. I know they're long, but certainly like is doing for us. There is clearly a lot to talk about with these stories. There's the characters, the plots, the competing factions, the world building, the politics. Like there's and the magic system, which is, I mean, it's just there's so much to talk about. I know for me, like one of the coolest things about having discussions like this is it's a great way to kind of like come together, compile, you share notes, so to speak, like share thoughts and expectations, like in gearing for the next part.
Yeah.
And so I really do hope that like discussions like this, I know there's a lot of people out there who've already like read these stories and coming back to like see what we think, and I think that's really cool. And I also hope that there are people that are excited to read these, where these can serve as ways to kind of like help also gear you in the way that they're kind of gearing us for like that next part, right? And so I'm very excited for the next part.
Yeah. Yeah, me as well. And I guess if you have any thoughts and you want to comment them, just make sure to keep it spoiler free in the comments. Obviously, this video is full of spoilers, but someone might click on the video, and if the top comment is a spoiler before they knew, we'll try and make it clear in the video title that it's spoilers only. But just label it spoiler or something like that, just in case, because I think the worst thing we could do is accidentally spoil this for somebody. And yeah, so just be aware and be nice. But not to us. You can be mean to us if you want. But yeah, that's it. We did it. We did our first shared joint book discussion for Deadhouse Gates, Book 1, Raraku, the best Pokemon. Yeah, Raraku. Book 2 is Whirlwind, and we will hopefully have that out in the next couple of weeks. And then yeah, hopefully we see you along for this whole journey with us, whether, you're new or you are, this is a series that is begging to be reread. So I'm sure there are people doing rereads. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you in chat. So yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
I think we did it.
Well, thank you everybody for watching this. Thank you for sharing this journey with us, and we will see you next time here in the next few weeks.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye.